Hello and welcome to another episode of the Family Renewal Podcast. I am Israel Wayne, and our special guest on this episode is Dr. Scott Turansky, who is a co-founder of the National Center for Biblical Parenting, or biblicalparenting.org. And I'm excited to have him as a guest as we're going to talk today about helping difficult and sometimes reluctant or even rebellious teenagers. Dr. Turansky, thank you so much for joining us on the Family Renewal Podcast.
I'm honored to be with you. This is really great. I think it's a great opportunity for us to interact, and working with teenagers is a challenge. So, and I do it all the time. So this opportunity to talk to you is really great for me. I'll be eager to share some things that I think will be helpful for the parents, the listeners that you have.
Well, the people who listen to my podcast or have read my books, I've written books on parenting and speak as well and do parenting seminars. In fact, last year we were both speaking at the D6 conference down in Orlando. Had a chance to sit in on a couple of your sessions there, and they were fabulous. But I don't readily recommend authors on the topic of parenting, even within the Christian community, because frankly, I just disagree with most of them. And so you're one of the few, I have a handful that I recommend all the time. And you're one of the guys that I constantly direct people to in our parenting group on Facebook, as well as people that I meet, because you have sound biblical wisdom behind what you teach. And so I'm grateful to have the opportunity to ask you some questions. So my first question that I want to throw at you is, I think as parents, we intuitively know that there's a difference between parenting a 2-year-old and parenting a 16-year-old. But for those parents, particularly who are kind of looking ahead to the teen years, what are just some of the fundamental differences in terms of approach that you have in parenting toddlers and very young children as opposed to parenting teenagers? How does your approach have to shift or change over time, or your mindset?
Sure. It's funny because I find that sometimes parents are saying, I'm finding that I'm having to resort back to some of the preschool strategies I was using now that my kids are teenagers. There are a lot of similarities between the preschool years and the teenage years, in the desire for independence and curiosity and identity kinds of things. So it is interesting. But here's what I think happens in the developmental stages. Children who are preschoolers, and they grow into elementary age. And when they're elementary age, we tend to be able to let them play on their own. And we're grateful that they've kind of moved into this other stage of life. And so we kind of release them to do that. And so when it's quiet in the other room, we're happy, we're okay with that. When the preschoolers, we're not. I mean, if they're quiet in the other room, we're going, oh, what's going on in there? I think something similar to that happens in the teen years. Sometimes when our kids are quiet in the teen years, we're going, I better check on and find out what's going on. And so I do think there are some similarities in that regard. But one of the main differences, so we have to make parenting shifts at each one of these developmental stages. And one of the significant things that's going to happen in this quest for adulthood that teenagers are in is that they're going to find themselves pursuing values and judgments. And as they're doing that, they need guidance. And so we're going to end up sometimes we're going to do more dialogue with them about some of those things that they're pursuing. And other times we're going to be more firm and require some action on their part. Balancing those two things is going to be strategic as we work with these young people. Let me just say one more thing about that. There are 3 stages of adolescence. So let me just elaborate on that briefly so we know what we're talking about here. The first stage of adolescence goes between ages 12 to 16, give or take 2 years, and it's characterized by emotional driven decision-making, just brain development and so on. These kids often are doing what they feel like doing. I don't feel like working on my homework. I don't feel like obeying you. Or they go after junk food, or this is where they try some of their adventure kinds of things. It's emotionally driven decision making. A lot of these kids become addicted to electronics during this age because it feeds their emotions, whether it's anxiety with social media or it's just the intensity of video games can feed them. So emotionally driven decision making, which means parents need more hands-on work with their young adolescence than maybe they had planned. The second stage of adolescence is 16 to 20, give or take 2 years, characterized by a mission-oriented view of life. You see that shift take place when the child says, I'm going to college, so therefore I am going to study now, or I want to be healthy, therefore I'm not going to eat junk food. They have this mission-oriented view of life, and we want to feed that, so they're developing this sense of maturity or discipleship or occupation or whatever it is where they want to go. The last stage of adolescence, which often parents don't realize, goes between 20 and 25, give or take 2 years, and that's the launching stage. Most young people today are not independent, nor can they live independently until they're 25, 26, 27 years old. That's just in our culture nowadays. So we have to be able to know how to launch them successfully. Each one of those stages of adolescence are significant and important, and we need to know what we're doing and how to work with them in those stages.
Excellent. It's really helpful for you to outline that a little bit so that we can kind of know what to expect, especially parents who aren't there yet but are looking forward to it. I was reading a Christian book before I had teenagers. I have 2 young adults now and 4 teenagers living in my home. My wife and I have 11 children. And so the teen topic is very relevant for me right now as well. But before I had teenagers, I read this book, and the gist of it was eventually you're going to have children that turn into teenagers. And when this happens, they're going to become despondent, morose, interned, reclusive, angry. They're going to develop all kinds of antisocial behaviors. You're not going to be able to really have a relationship with them for a good 6 years. And then, hopefully when they become adults, they'll crawl out of it. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that just sounds really depressing. Obviously, when children enter puberty, there are changes. And sometimes you see, like, my child that I knew and loved at 9, 10 years old is a very different kind of person now. What's the balance between, I guess, what is common and just part of this growing up process, and what should be some flags that some behavior is abnormal? Do you understand the question? Like, when should a parent start getting concerned? Like, I don't think this is just normal teen behavior.
Well, I think that, first of all, a lot of parents contact me and they say, is this normal? And my response to that is, maybe it's normal, but that doesn't mean it's right. Nor does it mean we're going to be content to allow this to continue. The normal in our society is not what we as Christian parents want in our families. We want closeness. We want a sense of mission in our young people. And a lot of young people, for example, believe, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, that the children have beliefs inside of their hearts. But a lot of young people believe in their hearts that their job in life is to have fun, especially during the teen years. My job in life is to have fun. I got teenagers who tell me, I don't want to grow up. I'm having too much fun. That is a misunderstanding of adolescence. Adolescence is a mission-focused period of time. And so it's very important for as we're having our children work through the pre-adolescent years, that we're communicating that you are about to engage in the very important work environment of life. You are on a mission during your teen years to establish your priorities and to establish your values and establish your convictions, to have a strong base, and your goal is not joy. Those who say pleasure is my goal become addicted. Just think about it, okay? If you think pleasure is your goal, addiction is the result. And that's why we have video game addiction, or we have pornography, or we have drug addiction during the teen years, is because children are pursuing pleasure instead of pursuing conviction and a life mission. And God has set us on a path for that life mission. So the normal in life is going in the wrong direction. And Jesus told us about that. He said there's a broad road, and that broad road is broad because lots of people are on it, and they are headed toward a goal, and that goal is destruction. That's normal. But Jesus says there is a narrow road. Why is it narrow? Because not too many people are on it, but that's the road that leads to life. That's the road we want our children on. And we believe that there are great paths to take our children on that'll help them along during these changes that are happening, that can move them and progress them toward discipleship. That's our goal. Discipleship, being mature, responsible servants of Jesus Christ. So we're moving them along in this path, and it takes some work to do it.
One more question I want to ask you before we dive into some of the deeper teen questions is, for those parents who aren't there yet, They're raising younger children, looking forward to the teen years. You talk so much about heart issues as a parent and reaching your child's heart. What can we do as parents to lay the right kind of foundation so that the teen years won't be so bumpy?
Yeah, I say to parents, are you planning to have teenagers? Because that's really what we need to be talking about. So when we're working with preschoolers, we're working with elementary children, certainly pre-adolescent kids, we are forming so many things about the conscience and about the faith that they have. We're doing these things because they are the predecessors to strong integrity during the years when they're experiencing some of these changes, and that's going to be strategic for them as they're moving forward.
There are a lot of Christian parents who come to principles of good parenting late. Maybe they didn't become a Christian until they already had children, or maybe they just didn't study diligently about how to parent, or maybe they even did a lot of the right things, but they find themselves in the teen years and they find that that foundation isn't there, and that now there are deeply ingrained behavior patterns that are negative. They're embedded in this teenager's life and they don't know how to deal with it. And so
Sure.
let me just run a couple scenarios, unless you want to jump in on that. But let me run a couple scenarios. So you have a mom who is 5'4" with a 16-year-old son who is 6'2". And the mom says, it's Tuesday night. I need you to take out the trash. And he says, take it out yourself. And he keeps reading a comic book on the couch. And this is the kind of thing she has to deal with. And I know you get these kinds of questions, like real life questions from moms who say, what do I do? Like, I can't discipline him in the same way that I used to. How do I motivate this guy and make him do what I need him to do when physically he's bigger than me? And I don't know where to go with this. What do you say to that mom?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think that we experience challenges in our parenting that require that different approaches. And so I think a whole heart-based approach is much more strategic at working with these children. And some people think when we say heart, we say that means we're going to be warm and fuzzy with them more. That's not what we're talking about. Oh, that's important. Some people think we're talking about talking more with our kids because we believe parents are the best counselors with their children. Some parents will say, my kid won't listen to me. I say, whoa, whoa, whoa. When I say this, I'm not meaning that you're going to do more talking, although I think talking is good. What I'm saying here is that we're going to do therapy with our children. That is home therapy. We're going to change the tendencies they have in their hearts in order to help them conform to the image of Christ. So we're going to put them on a path that's going to move them. And there are 7 tools that we embrace in our coaching program that are tools that come from the way God relates to us and as our heavenly Father. So if we can look God as our Father, and we've studied how God worked with the disciples, how he worked with the prophets, how he worked with the Israelites, how he worked with the patriarchs, just how God works with all these people. And we've identified these different tools, 7 tools that we can use to bring about major change in the life of a child in a short period of time. Let me just give you a quick example. I had a lady, I just started working with a family yesterday. This family, the mom is a child psychiatrist, and her husband's highly educated as well. And they have a 14-year-old. Great Christian parents. This mom actually teaches parenting seminars, but they're struggling with their teenager. And they're saying we must be missing something. So I met with them just the very first of 8 sessions, 8 weeks. I meet with them the first time. And after I was done with that first session, she says, this is what we're missing. We need this. And so here she is now realizing that now she has some new tools that she didn't have before that now she's going to implement, and we're going to see some significant change. You're not going to force a 16-year-old off the couch and say, yes, you are going to take off the trash, and if you don't, I'm going to make you. I mean, you're not going to do that. But we are going to use consequences when necessary. We are going to use some other tools here to reach the child's heart in order to bring about significant change. So it's powerful. It's a different way of thinking about parenting. And I regularly am working with parents whose children are anxious. I'm working with a 16-year-old now. Parents are parents of a 16-year-old, the child's very anxious. I've got kids who are very angry. I've got kids who are won't accept no as an answer. We got all of these kids who have these challenges that need to change. Here's one of the beautiful things about the way God works with us. It's never too late. God always can bring about change. I believe in a God who changes people at any age. And so we, with the grace of God, are working as God's hands and feet in the lives of our children to help bring significant change in the lives of these kids.
Quite often, when I talk to parents about this issue, it's usually the moms that are coming to me with the questions. And sometimes I'll say, where's dad in this equation? And it kind of gets quiet. How important do you think dad is in his role during these teen years?
Well, I'm going to say, let me say this, because you're asking the question about moms, because moms often feel disappointed, and dads do too sometimes, when their spouse is not on board like they are. So I have a parent who'll come to us, a male or female, and he'll say, well, I want to do this, but my spouse isn't on board. Can I still go through the program with you and in 8 weeks learn more about a heart-based approach? And I say, definitely. Let's start working together, because the power of a mom or the power of a dad is very significant. Don't underestimate your role in working with your children. So if I'm talking to a dad, I'll say your role is really important. But if I'm talking to a mom, I'll say your role is really important. I don't want to, by your question, encourage the guilt trip that a mom might put on a dad that says, hey, look, you're supposed to be the head of the house here. You're supposed to be spiritually initiating. You're supposed to be the disciplinarian here, because that's only going to foster marital discord. It's unnecessary. What in an ideal world, we would have husbands leading. Okay, that would be great. But if that isn't taking place, then it's very appropriate for a woman to lead in those situations. We see examples of that. Look at Timothy. Timothy's mother and grandmother are the ones who are credited with his spiritual development. You have power. So, and the question comes to me sometimes, look, I'm divorced. My kids are only in my house every other Thursday or every other weekend and on Thursdays. Can I do this? And my answer is, you take the window of influence you have and you maximize that window of influence. If you're the grandmother only has these kids during the week as you're doing the daycare with them 3 days a week, that is your window of influence. And so we're going to maximize that window of influence. And I know the other parent or may be working against you, but don't minimize the power that you have in this child's life. And we're going to take advantage of that the maximum way that we can in order to bring about change in this child and increase the working relationship between the parent and the child.
I know for me as a father, I tend to approach those types of difficult situations with my teenagers a little differently than my wife does. My wife will approach it on one level, and I'll tend to approach it a different way. For me as a father, if I have a 16-year-old who is being defiant, my natural inclination is to kind of go head to head and to puff out my chest and to be the dominant authority figure in the moment and sort of win by intimidation. However, I know that's not productive. I know that's not going to get me where I want to go. Like, that's my inclination. That's where I want to go with it. But I realize that's not ultimately going to be successful for me. What should I do in those moments where I feel like my authority is being questioned and I want to resort to a power struggle? And it is difficult, especially when they're bigger than you. But what do you say, especially to parents who tend to escalate the situation as a way of trying to resolve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And keep in mind that in most couples, one is more relational and one is more firm. Let's use the word firm, because I know you're describing yourself in terms that are rather negative, but what I know is that you're saying I use firmness to accomplish what needs to get done, and it works. It probably works a lot of the time. And what you're saying is your wife has a more relational approach, and that works some of the time. Children need both of those. Now, in an African-American family, it's often the mom who is the, one in charge, and she's the one kind of pushing the envelope here. So let's just balance those two as both good qualities or good parenting qualities. Those are two of the tools that God uses with us, by the way, 2 of the 7. One is relationship, And so God starts with us with relationship. And if I were giving an assignment to you or any parent today to work with their teenager, I would suggest that you start with relationship by doing this. I'm going to give you a very specific assignment. And this assignment is this: emotionally connect with your teenager in some way. That may be laughing with them, listening to them tell a story, telling a story yourself, cooking together, cleaning something up together, doing some project together. I don't know what it is. You know how you can connect with your teenager. So you emotionally connect, number one, and then you celebrate it. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to celebrate it. You're going to use the words we and together in the same sentence. We sure enjoy laughing together, don't we? Or when we work together, we sure get a lot done, don't we? And by doing that, that's the relational component. Okay. Now let's go. And you want to do that because you want to raise relationship level in your home. And in many families, this is high. In some families, it's low. So anyway, we're going to do it because relationship softens the heart. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to employ some firmness. And so we're going to do it in a way that's focusing on a goal of some kind. I'm probably, because I have a limited amount of time, can't explain all of what we do in the coaching program. But let's say a child is defiant or disobedient, or a child that has a hard time being flexible and just kind of, it has to be my way. We're going to put out there equality at point B, like cooperation, for example, which means you give up your agenda for the other person, you work together. So cooperation becomes our target. And then we're going to set up exercises where we're going to practice moving toward that cooperation with the child. We're going to tell the child we're doing this, and we're doing it for a reason, which brings us to our third tool. So the first tool is relationship. The second tool is firmness, which usually means structure of some kind. And the third tool is visioning. Son, we're going to work on this because it's going to help you to be a more effective as a leader. It's going to help you. It's going to improve our relationship. You're positioning yourself well, but you're going to be firm at the same time. So you've got visioning, firmness, relationship are three of the tools we're going to try to balance here to make this work. Let me tell you a quick story. One mom told me, 12-year-old adopted daughter, she's homeschooling. And she says, so much tension in our home. So I gave her that first assignment about relationship. And she told me the next week, here's what she did. She said to her daughter, first of all, she read this book as a read aloud in their homeschool. And she says to her that evening, we sure enjoy reading that read aloud together, don't we? And the daughter says, yeah, it's a good one. And mom says, yeah, the next chapter, I can hardly wait to see what they're going to say. And they talked about the characters a little bit. The next day, when mom started doing the read aloud, her daughter put her head down on mom's lap. Mom said she's never did that. Mom almost started crying while she's reading the book. This is the opening of the heart. This is what relationship does for any of us. This is how God relates to us. He opens our heart first with a relationship before he moves us from point A to point B on the sanctification process, which we're going to do with our children. We're going to help them move toward something. In this case, we're talking about cooperation. Another example, one dad said, my son is a terrorist in our home at 10 years old. He always has a different way of doing things. He will not listen to us. He delays. He tells us what to do. He threatens us sometimes. And I said, well, it sounds like your son's going to be a leader someday. And we laughed about that. But dad took that idea and turned it into his vision meeting and said to his son, I can tell you're going to be a leader someday. I want to help you to be a strong leader. And I'm going to show you some tools, some ways that you can do that. We're going to practice some cooperation exercises here. And I'm going to require you to cooperate with me here and give up your agenda and so on. And this is going to be so great because you're going to be a great leader. Dad says in 2 weeks, we saw such a major change in this boy. We couldn't believe it. It was so powerful to see this change. And we attribute that not only to the firmness we employed here, but also to the vision meetings. He just responded so much to these vision meetings because he saw that we were on his side. Really powerful. One dad called me and says, we have an 8-year-old boy. I don't know if you can help us. We have a terrible anger problem in our family. I said, okay. And he says, before we start, I'm going to send you videos from the Ring doorbell of him tearing up the front yard, which he did. He sent me all these videos. I watched him. Mom's out there trying to comfort him and do whatever. And he's just ranting and raving out there and breaking up the fall decorations. And we started working in that first week. After the end of week 1 in the coaching program, Dad says this. He says, I don't know what to say. He says, I can't believe the change we've seen in just 1 week. He says, I'm a glass half empty kind of guy. And I'm ready for the next shoe to drop. But if we can continue to see these kind of changes, this is a miracle happening in our home. And I believe that's what takes place when parents employ this heart-based approach with their children. It just does so many things. People can read about it in our books. In fact, at biblicalparenting.coach, that's the website that talks about the coaching program. Biblicalparenting.org is one of our 7 websites, and it's our main overall website with over 500 pages, articles, and so on. But then we have biblicalparenting.coach, where people can find a coach to work with them one-on-one to do exactly what I'm talking about. And I work with clients myself. Right at the top, it says buy the books. There's a book package that we use in the program. You don't have to read books while you're working as a client, but when I'm training coaches, they do read the books. And you can read the books if you want, if that's how you want to gain the information. You can work with a coach. But working with this idea of a heart-based approach is so powerful and so strategic that it brings major changes in the lives of families. So I would say, if we're going to work with teens to bring about change, it's not going to be by the same way we worked with them when they were pre-adolescents. It just doesn't work. We've got to make a parenting shift. We must employ these heart-based strategies, and amazing things happen in the lives of children.
So if someone wanted to buy a book of yours, you've written so many great ones, but one that specifically would help them with the teen journey, which one would you recommend?
Well, let me tell you about a couple of books. Okay, so Parenting is Hard book, I think, is foundational for anybody to read. It talks about 750 times the word heart is used in the Bible, and then articulates what the heart looks like so you know what you're dealing with and how that's different than behavior modification. It's used now in 3 seminaries as a textbook in their parenting program. So it's a really good book for anyone to read. It has a companion guide called the Heartwork Training Manual. It has different content, and it gives 8 exercises that you can use with your child. It does a lot of the things we do in the coaching program that provides the hands-on practical therapy type exercises you work on in your home to change the way things are happening, how children process life. But my favorite book is the one called Motivate Your Child. It's how to build internal motivation in children. And that book deals with the conscience and faith formation in children. I pulled this up. I was going to share it earlier, but I'm going to share it with you now. This is a passage from Paul writing to Timothy. Just listen to what he says. He says to him in chapter 1, verse 5, he says, the aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and 2 things, a good conscience and a sincere faith. Think about that for a moment. Good conscience, sincere faith. Paul says those 2 things are important for you, and you can read the context of it there. I'm just drawing those 2 things out because I think they're so significant for helping the teenage brain and heart develop. But then if we go down to verse 18, it says this charge I entrust to you, Timothy, my child, in accordance with the prophecies previously made about you, that by them you may wage the good warfare, holding on to 2 things, faith and a good conscience. No one going, whoa, didn't I just see those before? Faith and a good conscience? That's amazing. He says, by rejecting these, some have shipwrecked their faith, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I've handed over to Satan, that they may learn not to blaspheme. The point is, Paul is saying these are very important. 2 chapters later, Paul says, one of the characteristics of deacons is they must have a strong faith and a clear conscience. We better be getting the idea here. In chapter 4, verse 2, he says, some of these people have seared their consciences. If we're not working on conscience development and sincere faith, we are missing something very important in the teenage life. This is how you help a child be internally motivated, because God has placed inside of the heart of a young person a conscience and room for the Holy Spirit when they get saved. So that room is waiting for them, for the internal promptings that God wants to provide for them, and the conscience provides these internal promptings. It's a fascinating study. That's what's in the book, Motivate Your Child. The first half is all about the conscience. The second half is a biblical study of the conscience and how to apply it. The second is about faith formation in children in a strategic way. So those would be, that's my favorite book. And I think that would be a strategic tool for families to consider as well. I've written 15 books on parenting. I love every one of them, but you asked me for one, I gave you 3. So I better stop there, or I'll keep talking about all of these books.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that parents get those books and go through them. And then if you find that you have a situation where you need more personal help, then you can plug into the coaching programs that Scott was talking, where you can actually get some individualized help and training to help your you with your child. And then if you want to learn how to be a coach to coach other parents and teach them biblical principles of parenting, that's something you offer as well, right?
That's right.
People
Train
can be
coaches 3
presenters.
times a year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, train coaches 3 times a year. These people can work individually with, like I do, and you can learn more about that at biblicalparenting.coach. It's just a powerful way to bring about change. Let me just offer something to your listeners. I'd be happy to do a free consultation with any of them. Any of the people that want to go to my website, they can fill out the contact form and ask for a free consultation. I will then respond to them. We'll set up a time for free and help them understand. I'll give them some like a map of where I think they need to go. And I can point them to our resources if those are helpful. But if I can just give them next steps, many parents can just say, okay, I think I got this, and they can go forward. So yeah, free consultation if they want to contact me. On my website, biblicalparenting.org, they can fill out the contact form there.
That's fabulous. So again, biblicalparenting.org, biblicalparenting.coach. Dr. Scott Turansky, National Center for Biblical Parenting. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I hope to have you back on later, because I feel like we've only gotten 1% of the depth of the information and resources that are available through you and your ministry. We'll plan to do this again in the future, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. I'm very honored that you would choose me to be on your program, and blessings to all. It's hard work parenting, but as we follow, God's plan and work with these kids, good things can happen. God's grace needs to cover all of this. So God bless you all.
Thank you.